This case embodies one of the most important ideas that Socrates has been developing all his adult life, which is that one should never take revenge. And in this, he's completely turning on its head one of the foundational tenets of traditional Greek morality, which said that you should help your friends and harm your enemies. And Socrates says no, because all you can do to another person is you can take away their possessions, you can damage their body, you can kill them, but you can't harm their soul. But by doing wrong to somebody else, you are damaging your own soul and thereby taking away your chance of a virtuous and hence also a happy and flourishing life.
This was a city-state that believed in justice, that wanted to see justice enacted. So in Socrates' book, what form should punishment take?
It's a good point. He does believe that sometimes punishment is appropriate, but you punish somebody solely in terms of trying to cure their soul of the damage that they have brought upon themselves by doing wrong. So punishment is there to cure and purify a damaged soul.
I mean, even today, those still feel like quite progressive ideas.
Absolutely. I mean, we're barely catching up with these ideas. Even now, we still have debates. What is the purpose of punishment? Is it to kind of retribution, or is it some kind of reform? Now, Socrates is absolutely clear. The purpose of punishment is to reform.
They are fascinating ideas, but they must have been very, very troubling to the Athenians, because it must have felt as if he was kind of unpicking the foundations that kept communities together.
Yeah, it would have looked weak to them. It would have looked like, oh no, you're not a real man. You're not standing up for yourself. What are you doing? In a way, he's almost anticipating the teaching of the Sermon on the Mount, you know, turn the other cheek in a sense.
But he's 500 years before all that.
Oh, yes.
How does he dare to march so out of step from the rest of society?
Because I think he absolutely believes that nobody else can harm his soul, but if he takes part in the illegal actions that he was invited to take part in, then he will be absolutely damaging his own soul and taking away his chance of a happy and flourishing life.
In the name of wisdom and truth, Socrates was prepared to stick his head dangerously high above the parapet. Interestingly, it's a quality that he shares with both Confucius and the Buddha. For all three philosophers, personal comfort and personal security came a poor second to principle. And in the case of Socrates, having the courage of his convictions would prove to be a matter of life or death.
As Athens' enemies closed in, society turned in on itself. Freedom was a luxury it could no longer afford.
Finally, the Spartans brought Athens to her knees. They tore down her city walls and installed a junta of 30 hand-picked oligarchs. Death squads roamed the streets and thousands of Democrats were disappeared, forced into exile or executed.
Even though a counter-revolution restored democracy just 8 months later, it was a deeply compromised democracy, riven with suspicion and recrimination. In this poisonous atmosphere, Athens finally decided to deal with its troublesome gadfly. In 399 BC, at the age of 70, Socrates was back in court. This time, he was on trial. The accusations against him were read out here in the Agora, close to this oath stone.
The first charge was impiety, denying the gods and introducing new ones. The second, that he'd corrupted the young. Both could carry the heaviest penalty: execution.
The trial took place in a religious court. using the latest technology. A water clock measured the 3 hours allowed to the prosecution's case.
Were his accusers politically motivated? Was he being scapegoated for his association with prominent anti-democrats like Alcibiades? Perhaps. But then he'd set about to open the minds of the young, and with his goading questions to challenge the status quo.
Eventually, the water clock was refilled for the philosopher to defend himself. Plato recounts how Socrates feels he's fighting a lost cause, thanks to Aristophanes' searing, damaging caricature of him.
How mad I was, how mad to swap the gods for Socrates.
It's not my crimes that will convict me, he said, but rumour and gossip. I can't possibly defend myself. It's like boxing with shadows. You will persuade yourselves that I'm guilty.
Yet, in typical style, Socrates uses his defence to sting his fellow Athenians from their moral slumber.
It is a brilliant, audacious speech, but it's also provocative and arrogant, and the jurors don't like it one bit. The city that once fetishised freedom and freedom of speech could not tolerate freedom to offend.
Socrates was judged by at least 500 men, chosen at random and recruited from all over the traumatised city-state.
The jurors would have used these ballots in a secret vote. A solid stem for acquittal, a hollow for condemnation.
Found guilty, a second vote is held to determine his punishment. Socrates has the chance to avoid execution by proposing a lesser alternative, typically a fine or exile. Instead, by speaking freely, democratically, he seems to invite martyrdom.
He declares that he's lived his life for the benefit of the city. He deserves reward, not retribution. He suggests dinner in perpetuity at the citizens' expense.
Socrates' irony loses him more support in the second vote. It seems he takes the news philosophically. The jury couldn't harm his soul, but they had harmed their own.
Now I go to die and you to live. God only knows which is the better journey.
Socrates didn't fear what he didn't know, including death. The man the oracle proclaimed to be the wisest was now on death row for putting his own philosophy into practice.
One of the things I find so compelling about Socrates is that even though he lived 25 centuries ago, in many ways he saw us coming. He denounces an obsession with looks, with material goods, with spin and with fame. He wasn't just exploring the meaning of life, but the meaning of our own lives. Just listen to this. Oh, my friend, why do you, who are a citizen of the great and wise city of Athens, care so much about laying up wealth and honour and reputation, and so little about wisdom and truth and the improvement of the soul? Are you not ashamed?
Socrates would have to wait a month for his execution, a sentence intended to silence him.
But Socrates' death at the hands of the people provided the perfect ingredients for his resurrection as an ideological martyr, a kind of blueprint philosopher. And ironically, what secured his legacy was the very thing that he disregarded throughout his life, the written word.
His supporters wrote detailed accounts of his extraordinary life, immortalising his ideas and his spirit. Through their words, his game-changing, history-making voice endures.
Still asking those probing, universal questions which even today are at the heart of our value systems. What makes us good? What is justice? How can we be happy?
Socrates was the inspiration for Plato and Aristotle, two giants of philosophy whose ideas would shape Western and Eastern civilization up until today.
Following Socrates' death, Plato abandoned his political ambitions in disgust and set up his academy, which would continue as a centre of learning for close on 1,000 years. This building is Athens' modern academy, and it's just a couple of miles from the original, and it's part of a network of academic institutions right across the globe, inspired by that Athenian example.
On the day of Socrates' execution, his distraught friends and family came here to the Agora. The place where Socrates had once walked freely was now his cage. But he is serene.
Calmly, he lifts the lethal little cup of hemlock poison and drinks. We're told that Socrates' last words, as the lethal hemlock took effect, were, "Crito, we owe a cop to Asclepius." With this cryptic message, even on the brink of death, he kept his followers and future scholars guessing.
Was he proving himself pious by invoking one of the city's deities? Or was he ironically giving thanks to the god of healing for relieving him of the sickness of existence?
Socrates might have been infuriating, but his tenacious questioning of what it means to be human still has absolute resonance. By stating that the ultimate evil is ignorance and that a good life is within our reach, he challenges us all never to be thoughtless.
The unexamined life is not worth living. With his head covered, no one saw the final moment when Socrates' precious soul slipped from that ugly, satirical, unforgettable face.
If the mind of Socrates has made you think, then explore further with the Open University. To discover how great minds have influenced our thinking today, follow the address on the screen and then the links to the Open University.
Next time, I investigate the gentleman philosopher Confucius. His attempts to influence the rulers of his day ended in failure. Yet his vision of a harmonious society inspired by the sage kings of the past would eventually shape one of the world's greatest civilizations.
The final part of Genius of the Ancient World is here on BBC4 at the same time next week. Coming up this evening, we're exploring a city beneath the waves in Pavla Petri in just a moment. And then Bethany's back in an hour as we're dredging up the evidence for Atlantis at 11. Stay with us.